The honourable member for Vancouver East.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And I'll be sharing my time with the member from Dartmouth, Cole Harbour today. Well, Mr. Speaker, it's not very often, in fact, it's very rare in the House that we would debate a motion all day that, in effect, is calling for the resignation of a minister. But that's exactly what we're doing. And we're doing that because we are faced with an incredibly serious issue in this country around food safety, and we're facing a very serious issue about lack of accountability at the ministerial level, which is a fundamental tenet of our parliamentary system. Mr. Speaker, the motion before us calls on the House to restore Canadians' confidence in Canada's food safety system by removing the current minister from office, by reversing budget cuts and halting the deregulation of Canada's food safety system, and directing the Auditor General to conduct an immediate assessment of food safety procedures and report to the Agriculture Committee. That's the motion that the NDP has brought before this House. I think it's been a very thorough debate today on a most incredibly serious matter. We have to recognize and look at the context of what's going on. This is the largest food recall in Canadian history. That in and of itself should ring a whole bunch of alarm bells about what's going on. We have now, I believe it's 15 cases of E. coli that have been specifically traced to the XL food plant in Brooks, Alberta. And we have the CFIA, the Canadian Food Inspection Agency, that has now recalled more than 1,800 beef products due to possible contamination. So, Mr. Speaker, this issue is extensive, and the recall extends to every single province, every territory, 40 states in the U.S., and 20 other countries. So this is something of incredible magnitude. And yet we have a minister who kind of rushed out the door too soon, saying that, well, they'd resolved the problem and there really wasn't a problem and they were taking action. But we know that the seriousness of what has taken place is something that is actually still unfolding as more and more information finally gets into the public realm. And I would like to say that I think one of the key issues in this tragic situation that's unfolded and this lack of safety in our food system, one of the key questions is the fact that on September the 13th, the Canadian Food Inspection Agency yanked XL's exporter license at the request of U.S. officials. But the Minister of Agriculture and his department determined that this meat was not safe enough to be sold to American consumers, yet they did not pull XL's Canadian license for another 14 days. And Mr. Speaker, I have to say that from the very beginning, every single day in this House, we have raised this question, and the Minister has still not been able to answer this question as to why it took 2 weeks from the initial action that took place in terms of the American market and a willingness to provide American families from possible contaminated products, and yet here in Canada that same action did not take place. So that, Mr. Speaker, to me that is a very significant issue that strikes right at the heart of the issue of ministerial responsibility, and that's why this motion is here before us today. I do think that it is incumbent upon us as parliamentarians to look at this issue in a holistic way and to look at it in a systemic way as to what's going on. We have one plant. I believe it's the third largest in Canada. It's a place that is processing 4,000, some people say up to 5,000 cows a day. So it's a major operation employing thousands of workers. But I think we have to look underneath what's going on here and look at whether or not we are also dealing with a systemic failure of our food safety system. And I would say that for all of us in the NDP, bringing forward this motion today, this is exactly what we are putting forward. We are alerting the Canadian public that this is more than just one plant. This is about a system overall. It's about a lack of proper inspection and regulation. It's about the failure of a self-policing system that is now, thrown into question as a result of what's happened. You know, Mr. Speaker, I have not been to this plant, and I imagine that most of us have not, so I have no direct experience. But everything that I have read, like many, many other Canadians, causes me to be very disturbed and very alarmed. I remember just reading an article in the Globe and Mail very recently, and I'd like to quote from it because for me anyway, it gave me some glimmer of understanding of what these mega plants, these mega operations are all about. So to quote from the Globe and Mail article, the headline was, "Can meat factories be safe at 4,000 cows a day, 3,000 steaks a minute?" Quote, "You have 35 seconds. Gut the cow without damaging its organs and be sure not to drop the stomach on the floor. Do not cut yourself with a swift-moving blade. Do not touch the scalding sanitary services. Then walk in hot water to clean your white rubber boots. Swap your knife out and start over again and again and again." This is life on the production line at the Lakeside Slaughterhouse in Brooks, Alberta, one of the 3 largest such facilities in Canada that together dominate the market. Owned by XL Foods, Lakeside slaughters 4,000 cows on a full day, cutting them into about 2 million pounds of beef. That's the equivalent of 3,000 steaks a minute. Plants like this are the reality of modern mass food production. Now, the article goes on much, much longer, and I don't have time to go into other issues that it brings forward. But to me, when I read that, and seeing films like Food Inc., for example, that tell us about the food production industry and how it is now controlled by massive corporations, and how its operation is so concentrated in these mega slaughterhouse plants, it does raise incredibly serious questions about the safety of our food, the food security. It raises questions about inspection and how it's done, and what kind of oversight there is. And you know, I hate to say it, but the situation in Brooks, Alberta, at the XL site, has really brought this now to the front of public attention. I think that's actually a good thing. If anything that's happened that has, I think, been positive, is that it has alerted a public consciousness about the seriousness of the situation that we face. And I'm sure that we've all had many emails from people expressing their concern about the situation at XL Foods and wondering what the heck it is that Parliament is going to do about it. I got one email that I was very interested in, and it was from someone who pointed out to me that originally the Canadian Food Inspection Agency used to be part of the National Health and Welfare. So it actually was not in agriculture. It was part of National Health and Welfare Canada. When the change was made and it was moved over to agriculture, there were actually many criticisms that were made that now the Department of Agriculture would have an inherent conflict of interest in administrating the CFIA. And I think that the question still remains today. How can a department whose primary role is to promote and to develop agriculture and agribusiness be to also serve and safeguard the health and well-being of consumers? I don't think that question has been answered either, Mr. Speaker, in the days that we've now spent on this issue in the House of Commons. So I think that is also very much a part of the question that we're examining here. I'd also like to draw attention to the situation of the workers at the XL plant. We know there's close to 3,000 workers, and we know that the UFCW, their union, Local 401, has clearly come out and expressed the concerns of the workers themselves, that the speed lines are way too fast, there's sewage backup, dirty washrooms, inconsistent temperatures, lack of proper training, and the list goes on and on and on. And so I actually feel very badly for these workers that have now been laid off. Some of them are having problems with EI. And working in a plant like this, where the stress of this high-speed production, as we heard, 35 seconds again and again and again, and the stress that places on workers, particularly if the rules and the procedures are not being followed, is something that is very serious. For example, we know that the workers are trained and want to sterilize knives between cuts, but they're discouraged from doing so because it means they'd fall behind their very, very stressful schedule of this 35 seconds. They'd fall behind in their work if they did actually follow the procedure. So we can see, again, another dramatic consequence of what's going on with the food safety system. So, Mr. Speaker, this motion today is very important. It is about ministerial responsibility. It is about good public policy and ensuring that our food system is safe in Canada, and I hope that members will support this motion. Thank you.
Questions and comments? Questions et commentaires? L'honorable député de Chicoutimi-Le-Fjord.
The Honourable Member for Chicoutimi-Le-Fjord. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My colleague sits on the Health Committee, as I do. She does an excellent job as the NDP health critic. So I'd like to know whether, due to her experience in that portfolio, it is normal to take 2 weeks to inform Canadians of a risk to their health. Thank you. The Honourable Member for Vancouver East.
Thank you to the member who also sits on the Health Committee and does a great job. We're a good team on the Health Committee, and we take our work very seriously. And I think one of the underpinnings of our work is the notion of public health. And so it's very disturbing that from a public health point of view, there is such a dramatic time lag of 2 weeks from when Canadians were fully alerted to what was going on. We know that the Public Health Agency of Canada has had information on their website, but we've not heard directly from the chief officer, who surely should be communicating directly with Canadians about the health issues involved here. And so I do feel that the whole public health side of this, in a broader way, has been really underplayed. We have a Public Health Agency of Canada. They're there. Their mandate is to protect the health of Canadians. But one gets the sense that the Conservatives, all that they're interested in is political damage control. They're interested in saving their own necks and not in dealing with some of the deeply systemic issues that are involved here that are posing risks to our food safety in Canada.
Questions and comments? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Agriculture.
Thanks very much, Mr. Speaker. Once again, the opposition, rather than taking a serious look at food safety, looking at a bill that is in front of Parliament, they're playing partisan politics with a motion that we see in front of the House today. I mean, if Canadians could see this motion and refresh their memory about what this motion is actually about and what it actually says, it would be evident, it would be apparent that it is simply partisan politics. But even in this milieu of partisan politics from the opposition, I really would stress that it is essential that they are accurate in what they say. And Mr. Speaker, once again, this member said that the Americans uncovered it first, and they told us, Mr. Speaker, it is simply not true. That's not the case. The Americans discovered it when CFIA discovered it, and they were communicating at the same time. And I would ask this member, is she aware of this? And if she is aware of this, would she please correct the record for the House and for Canadians? I think it's the fair thing to do, Mr. Speaker.
Member for Vancouver East.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I am, so surprised to hear this member say that we are not taking this issue seriously. I mean, really? Come on. We've been raising this issue day after day after day in question period, in committee, in the public forums, through this motion today. This is why we have this motion today, because we are so concerned. We are so serious. We've done our homework. We know exactly. We've got the timeline of what happened. I mean, come on. The reason that we're debating this today is because there's been a complete lack of accountability from the minister on this issue. That's where the blame lies, Mr. Speaker, not with the opposition.
Questions and comments? Questions et commentaires? L'honorable député de...
Honourable Member for Gaspésie-La-Madeleine. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I also want to thank my colleague for her excellent presentation and the great work she does for her riding. I think that's quite appreciated by many, many citizens.
Specifically on this responsibility question, the government seems to have a serious problem of accountability here, especially that it took them almost 2 weeks to actually come down and start a recall procedure. I'm wondering how does risking the Canadian public mean that in any way help Canadian citizens have any degree of belief and credibility in the CFIA?
The honourable member for Vancouver East, a short response, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and just a quick response. Well, really, at the end of the day, it does come down to ministerial responsibility. Our system of governance, our parliamentary system, is based on that very foundation. You can't pass the buck. You can't blame your officials. At the end of the day, the ministers are responsible. And as I pointed out, still to this day, the minister has not answered the key question as to why it took him 2 weeks to take the action that he needed to take. And because we've never had an answer to that question, we've not had an answer to many other questions, the only recourse we have left is to say that this minister should not be allowed to be in his job.
Before we resume debate, I'll just let the member for Dartmouth Cole Harbour know that the period allowed for business of supply today comes to an end at 5:15, so I'll have to interrupt him at that time, partway into his remarks, I'm sure. Resuming debate, the
Honourable member for Vancouver East.
Mr. Speaker, conditions at the XL plant in Brooks are shocking. Fecal matter found on carcasses, raw blood dripping on meat, and duct tape holding parts of the plant together. What's so troubling, though, that this information is coming from American audits, not Canadian authorities. When pressed, CFIA called these reports, quote, a snapshot in time. Nothing for Canadians to be worried about. Well, Canadians are worried. When will the Conservatives take responsibility for these real concerns that Canadians have?
Honourable Minister of Agriculture.
Well, of course, Mr. Speaker, we take consumer confidence seriously. That's why, with the integrated nature of the North American beef market and processed market, as trading partners, Canada and the U.S. regularly audit each other's food safety systems. The next U.S. audit will be in Canada coming up the end of this month, Mr. Speaker. But the U.S. audit that she's talking about clearly stated that upon finding food safety issues, and I quote, the CFIA and the establishment took immediate and appropriate corrective actions. They did the right thing, Mr. Speaker.
Honourable member for Vancouver East.
Mr. Speaker, why are we leaving it to the Americans to tell us what's wrong at the plant? The fact is the only documentation we're getting on the XL operation is from Americans, and it paints a very bleak picture. Canadians are concerned about the integrity of the food safety system, and they're concerned about the health and safety of their families. But this minister dismisses these concerns and ignores safety failures. When will they start telling the truth about what's going on at the XL plant?
The Honourable Minister of Agriculture.
Well, Mr. Speaker, if the members opposite were actually concerned about the truth, they would reveal the fact that most of the information that's being bandied about in the media is from a 2003 audit in a different plant.
The Honourable Member for Kings